Look at the building across the street. Now look at the windows closest to the pavement. Half of the glass is buried in the dirt. Sometimes the frame is sliced in half by the sidewalk. Official history calls this a cultural layer. They say dust and waste accumulated over centuries. This is a lie. This explanation contradicts the laws of physics and urban planning. Nobody builds a window that faces a wall of soil. You are looking at a global anomaly that proves our history is a reboot. We didn't build our cities. We excavated them. Chapter 1: The Window to Nowhere. Walk through London, Moscow, or New York. You will see 19th century buildings with magnificent stone carvings and ornate brickwork. Then look down. Those same expensive materials continue 2, 3, or 5 meters underground. Excavations for subway lines often reveal fully formed facades with doors and windows deep beneath the surface. Why would a 19th century architect waste thousands of high-quality bricks on a wall that was meant to be buried? Labor was cheap, but materials were not. Digging a massive hole just to build a decorated wall, and then fill it back in is insanity. It's like buying a tuxedo and wearing it under a diving suit. The official story says these were light wells, or basement windows. That theory fails the moment you look at the drainage. If you build a window below the ground level, every rainstorm turns your basement into a swimming pool. Modern engineers struggle with waterproofing today. Yet we are told Victorian builders did it effortlessly across millions of buildings worldwide. The chance of this being a design choice is zero. These windows were once above ground. They were catching sunlight, not worms. Chapter 2: The Myth of the Cultural Layer. Archaeologists claim the ground rises naturally. They say horses, coal soot, and trash raised the street levels by several meters in just 100 years. Let's do the math. To raise a city by 3 meters in a century, the ground must rise by 3 centimeters every year. That doesn't sound like much. But in a city like Paris, that would mean millions of tons of dirt appearing out of thin air every 12 months. Where did it come from? If the streets were that dirty, people wouldn't be walking. They would be wading through hip-deep mud. We have photographs from the 1850s. The streets are paved. They are clean. You can see the buried windows in the background of these photos. This means the layer was already there. It didn't grow slowly. It arrived suddenly. Imagine humanity forgot how to use a shovel for 100 years. It's impossible. We are told the inhabitants were so lazy they just let the dirt cover their front doors and started using the second floor as the new entrance. Write in the comments, would you let your house get buried in mud until you had to climb through a window, or would you pick up a broom? Chapter 3: The Great Earth-Moving Fraud. Look at the records of the 1800s. It was an era of great fires and great renovations. Every major city seems to have burned down or been rebuilt between 1830 and 1890. Chicago was literally lifted by jacks in the 1850s. They tell us they raised the entire city to improve drainage. Thousands of buildings, some weighing tons, were jacked up by hand. This was before the internal combustion engine. Before hydraulic lifts. The story is a cover-up for a massive excavation project. They weren't building the city higher. They were trying to recover what was already there. They found a city buried in clay and sand. They cleared the streets and declared themselves the builders. Look at the old world architecture. It is identical from Tokyo to San Francisco. Red brick, arched windows, massive domes. This isn't a style. It's the remains of a single, global civilization that was hit by a catastrophe we aren't allowed to talk about. Chapter 4: The Anatomy of the Basement. Go into the basement of any pre-1900 building. If the walls are made of high-quality, fired red brick, you are standing in a former living room. Look at the ceiling height. Basements are usually cramped. These basements often have 4-meter ceilings. Look at the windows. They are arched from the inside. This is structural support for a floor that was meant to be seen. In some cities, like Omsk or Seattle, there are entire networks of streets beneath the current ones. These aren't sewers. They are fully formed shops with display windows. When researchers ask to dig deeper, the permits are denied. Structural instability, they say. Safety concerns. The truth is deeper. If we dig, we find that the foundations don't exist. The buildings just keep going down. We are living on the rooftops of a lost world. Chapter 5: The Missing Dirt. If a global event buried our cities in 3 to 5 meters of clay, where did the clay come from? It's not topsoil. It's sterile, mineral-rich clay. This isn't the result of dust. This is the result of a massive displacement of Earth. Some call it a mud flood. Others call it a liquefaction event. The terminology doesn't matter. The physical evidence does. Look at the trees. In many historic areas, there are no trees older than 150 years. All the massive forests we see today are teenagers in geological terms. It's as if the surface of the Earth was wiped clean and reset. The 1830s weren't just a time of industrial revolution. They were a time of salvage. We found the machines. We found the buildings. We just had to dig them out. Think about the scale of the great exhibitions of the 1800s. These world fairs showcased massive, impossible palaces built in months. Then they were torn down. Why? Because they weren't temporary exhibits. They were reclaimed cities that didn't fit the new narrative. They had to be destroyed to hide the truth of who actually built them. The precision of the brickwork in these buried floors is higher than what we produce today. Lasers didn't exist in 1850. Yet the lines are perfect. The symmetry is absolute. We are told men with horses and carts achieved this. The chance of that is 1 in a billion. We are missing a massive piece of the puzzle. What I will show you next will flip your understanding of what lies beneath our feet. We found the windows. We found the doors. But right here we hit the main lie of the official timeline. You thought the mud was the end of the story? You were wrong. What's inside the forbidden levels of the catacombs under our largest cities isn't just dirt. It's technology that still works. If we weren't the ones who built these cities, then who were we? And more importantly, what happened to the people who lived on the real first floor? The records show a massive population dip in the early 19th century. Then, suddenly, orphan trains began moving thousands of children across the world to repopulate these empty, excavated cities. They were taught a new history. A history where their ancestors built these masterpieces with hammers and chisels. I'm going to show you the maps. Maps from the 1700s that show cities where today there is only desert. I'm going to show you the photos of empty cities in the 1860s, cities with grand architecture but not a single person on the street. It wasn't because of long exposure times. It was because the cities were empty. But there is one place where the digging never stopped. A place where the basements lead to something that shouldn't exist according to our current science. We are about to go deeper than the clay. We are going to the level where the modern world ends and the real power grid begins. Chapter 2: The Invisible Infrastructure. Look at the subways of London, New York, or Moscow. Official history says these tunnels were dug by hand or with primitive steam-powered shovels. Think about the scale. Thousands of miles of tunnels. Millions of perfectly fired bricks. No mass-production factories existed to support this volume of material. No records show where the millions of tons of excavated earth were dumped. If you dig a hole that big, you create a mountain. Those mountains don't exist. The truth is simpler and more terrifying. We didn't dig these tunnels. We cleared them out. We found a pre-existing transit system and laid our tracks inside it. It is like finding a supercar in a cave and claiming you built it because you changed the tires. In 1863, the first London Underground line opened. Look at the photos. The stations look like cathedrals. Why would Victorians build ornate, vaulted ceilings and use decorative stonework for a place meant to be filled with coal smoke? They wouldn't. They were restoring an existing structure. These were the transit corridors of the civilization that lived on the real ground level. Write in the comments, why does every major city in the world have a sewer system that looks like it was designed for giants? Chapter 3: The Great Restoration of 1850. Between 1840 and 1880, every major city on Earth experienced a Great Fire. Chicago, Boston, London, Moscow, San Francisco. The list is endless. We are told a cow kicked over a lantern or a baker left an oven on. These fires were not accidents. They were a global reset button. The fires cleared the upper, damaged layers of the old world. This allowed the new administrators to build modern facades on top of the ancient foundations. It was the ultimate architectural cover-up. Look at the photographs taken immediately after these fires. You will see stone buildings turn to dust, yet the basements remain perfectly intact. Why did the heat destroy granite but spare the brick layers underground? Because the underground layers were built with a different technology. This brings us to the most uncomfortable evidence: the Orphan Trains. Between 1854 and 1929, over 250,000 children were shipped from the east coast of the United States to the west. Similar movements happened in Russia and Europe. Where did these children come from? Why were the new cities empty of adults but filled with grand buildings? The cities weren't built for us. We were the replacement population. These children were the blank slate. They were taught that their ancestors were primitive farmers. They were told that the giant buildings they were living in were built by their fathers with nothing but hammers and horses. It was a lie designed to hide the fact that we are a scavenger civilization. Chapter 4: The Statistical Nightmare. Let's talk numbers. The probability of every city on Earth simultaneously deciding to build basements with full-sized windows and ornate doors is 0. It is a statistical impossibility. In 19th century Russia, some buildings have 3 or 4 levels below ground. These are not storage rooms. They have frescoes. They have heating vents. They have sophisticated drainage. To build this today would cost billions and require advanced geological surveys. In 1830, they supposedly did it while fighting wars with muskets. Imagine you find a buried smartphone. You don't know how it works, but you find the on button. You use it to light your room. That is what we did with the old world. We found the infrastructure and used it for the simplest possible tasks. We used grand energy harvesting cathedrals as warehouses. We used ancient transit tunnels for sewers. The chance of this being a coincidence is 1 in a billion. Our modern world is just a coat of paint on a masterpiece we no longer understand. Chapter 5: Why Digging is Prohibited. Try to dig a deep hole in the center of Rome, London, or New York. You will hit a wall of bureaucracy. They tell you it's for safety, or archaeological preservation. In reality, it is to prevent you from seeing the transition point. There is a level where the brick changes. There is a level where the materials become impossible. In the deepest basements of the world's oldest banks and government buildings, the walls are not made of stone. They are made of a single, seamless geopolymer that resists modern drills. We are told the bedrock is just below us. But in many cities, the bedrock is actually the roof of a much larger structure. We are living on the 3rd or 4th floor of a global megalopolis. If you go to the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, you see the White City. It was a miracle of architecture. They told us it was built in 2 years out of plaster and wood, then they burned it down. Does that make sense? You don't build a 200-foot tall dome out of plaster to burn it 2 years later. You find an old world city, claim you built it to show off your power, and then destroy the evidence so no one asks where the technology went. Chapter 6: The Silent Witnesses. The most damning evidence is right in front of your eyes. Look at the triumphal arches in Paris, Berlin, and Russia. They tell us these were built to celebrate military victories. Look at the size of the openings. Look at the complexity of the carvings. These weren't monuments. They were functional components of the old world's energy grid. They are often located at the intersection of ley lines or underground water currents. When you see a photo of a mud-flooded building, don't look at the dirt. Look at the person standing next to the window. They look small. The architecture is, oversized, for human use. The ceilings are too high. The doors are too heavy. We didn't build these cities for ourselves. We moved into them. We are the tenants, not the landlords. Conclusion: the step back. Everything we have discussed contradicts the textbooks. The buried windows, the empty cities of the 1860s, the impossible tunnels, and the orphan trains. It suggests a history that was erased and rewritten in the mid-19th century. Why would they hide this? Because if you know you are living on the ruins of a superior civilization, you stop believing in progress. You realize we are in a state of decay, not evolution. I don't claim this is the ultimate truth. I am not a historian or an archaeologist. I am just a person who looked at a basement window and realized it was a door. I am just sharing reflections based on the anomalies that official science refuses to explain. Next time you walk down a street in an old city, look down. Look at the iron grates in the sidewalk. Look at the windows at your feet. You aren't looking into a cellar. You are looking at the lost world that supported the one you see today. Write in the comments, have you ever seen a building that looked like it was sinking into the ground? Or have you found something in a basement that didn't belong there? The evidence is everywhere. You just have to stop looking at the sky and start looking at the dirt.